Hello, my name is Hadassah and welcome back to my channel. I'm finally back from vacation and today we will be going over all of the books I read in the month of April this year. And April was actually a very good reading month, so I am very happy with the books that I get to share the reviews of today. And so I actually read one nonfiction book in the month of April, and I don't always read nonfiction, so I like to start with the nonfiction books I've read. And as always, I will make my way from D and Fs to 5-star books like I always do. Now for nonfiction, I only read one book, but it was a 5-star book, and that book was The Hiding Place by Corrie. This is the beautiful cover that I got to do. This is the engaging visual journey, and so it has lots of cool photographs and illustrations, and it does do a really good job of keeping the reader engaged, and I really appreciate that. And I just really loved this story. It is a hard story because if you're familiar with this book, it takes place during the Holocaust, and Corrie and her family are put in the concentration camps. But it was just so beautifully written. And Corrie she does a beautiful job of just always pointing the reader back to God and His goodness and how good of a God He is. Even if it feels like, your world is falling apart. He's still there and He's still guiding you through every step of your journey. And so, yeah, 5 stars. Would gladly recommend to any mature readers. I think anyone high school age on up would be good with reading this. Otherwise, it might just be too hard of a story for younger readers. So yes, very wonderful book. Would gladly recommend. And now I will do my my fiction with books, which I read. And I read, let's see, how many books did I read? I read a total of 10 fiction books, however one was a DNF. So my DNF for the month of April was War Hour by Loscig. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And I'm on BookTube, and I saw this author promoting this book pretty much every single day for a good period of time. And so I was finally like, you know what? I gotta check this out. So I asked my library to buy it, and they bought it for me, thankfully. It was just, the problem with authors publishing their own book is that they often don't hire an editor. And that was very clear, very obvious in this book because it just so obviously needed more rounds of editing, or just a round of editing. There were words that just weren't used correctly, incorrect punctuation. One thing would be mentioned in the first chapter that's never alluded to again. So I made my way, I think 22% of the way through this book, which I think is a pretty good try. If I remember correctly, the thing that I'm talking about, the thing mentioned that was never mentioned again, I think it mentioned that a certain character had a dimple, and then they never mentioned the dimple again, which I thought was strange. Not super important to the plot at all, but just a little bit jarring, if you get what I mean. And so, yeah, I overall think that it was a very promising premise. One of the parts of the book actually reminded me of the Wonderland Trials by Sarah Ella. Is that the author? I think Sarah Ella. But I liked that part. But yeah, I only made my way 22% of the book. And then, guess what? I had 0 1-star reads in the month of April, which is crazy. I think this is the first month this year where I had 0 1-star reads, so that is a huge blessing. And then I did have only 1 2-star read, which is also just crazy. And that 2-star read was Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. I have never read anything by this author. I've heard many high praises for this book. was not my favorite. The magic system kind of reminded me of The Wizard of Oz, which I do like the series The Wizard of Oz. However, one of the downsides to that series is that I felt like the magic was always just a little bit darker than I would have liked for a children's book. And I felt the same thing with this book. I just felt like it was a little dark. And then of course, you know, there's witches in this magic system and wizards, which aren't my favorite thing to read about. I prefer when they use words like fairy, but that's just my own personal preference, right? And then also, it was just overall a little bit confusing. And I feel like I've got pretty good reading comprehension since I've been reading for so long. But the whole magic system, I did not feel like I had a very firm grasp on. And I like to have a very clear understanding of what the magic system is, even if you do a little bit of info dumping on me in one of the first chapters. I still prefer that over being confused. So that was this book. I do not think I will be finishing the rest of the series. The reason why I read this though is because a book I really like, What Comes of Attending the Commoner's Ball by Elisabeth Aimee Brown. She said that her book was a retelling of Cinderella and Howl's Moving Castle. And I love Cinderella and I could see the Cinderella aspects, but I wanted to read Howl's Moving Castle to understand the Howl's Moving Castle aspects of that book. So I do now see those aspects of it in the book. So overall, I think it was worth it to read, but it was only a 2-star read. So that was my 2-star read, and then I had 2 3-star reads, which means I had a lot of 4-star reads this month, which is really great. So my first 3-star read was again an issue with editing, and that was Poisoned Heart by Abigail Manning. I had never read anything by this author before, but she is a fairy tale retelling author, and I wanted to try her out, especially since her covers reminded me of the books by Melanie Cellier. And all in all, it was a fun read. However, this one just needed so much editing, okay? There was one time where she used a word. I wish I would have bookmarked this word so I could remember what word it was, because I do not remember. But she used it incorrectly. Like, she used it in a sentence in a way that did not make sense with the meaning of the word, which was frustrating to me. Distracts you from the story. Speaking of distracting. But yes, so incorrect usage of words. There was some incorrect punctuation throughout, like a comma where there shouldn't have been a comma, or places where there should have been a comma and there wasn't, which is always very frustrating. And also, so many of the words were either incorrectly spelled or just missing letters. Like, it would have the majority of the word and then would just be missing the last 2 letters, which thankfully I was able to fill in the blank. But I feel like just, editing would have caught that so quickly. If I myself as a reader was able to catch it, surely an editor would have caught it, right? So that is the reason why I only rated this 3 stars, was the editing. Oh, as to the actual plot of the book, the main character, her name is Arabella. She is our Snow White character. This is a Snow White retelling. And so in this book, she hides instead of in a cabin or a cottage, she hides in a laundry working place. And the laundry aspects of this book were actually really fun, really cute. And I enjoyed that aspect, instead of it being the dwarfs, it's her co-workers. That was just fun to me. And this main girl, she had good character development, because she started out really vain, selfish, conceited, prideful, all the negative character traits. But she learns to overcome them as she learns to get along with her co-workers, and ultimately, has to save her kingdom. So I enjoyed the plot, but just the downsides made for this to be an only 3-star book. And then for my next 3-star book, that was the book Over and Out by Jenni Walsh. And this is a historical fiction, 8 to 12-year-old type book. And it takes place during the Cold War in the city of Berlin, the east side of Berlin that had that was trapped in with the wall, the Berlin Wall, right? And so this is about a girl, I think her name is Sophie. I don't actually remember her name, but I'm thinking it's Sophie for some reason. And she gets turned into an informant by the government. They make her be an informant, and they threaten her with her mother, since her mother has some special needs, and they're saying, hey, be an informant or else. And that was kind of hard to read. With the Berlin aspect and everything, this definitely did remind me of A Night Divided by Jennifer A. Nielsen. She also has a historical fiction book with very similar writing style, where her main character also has to become an informant, and so there are many parallels between the stories. Something unique about this book, though, is that our main girl, Sophie, if I'm remembering correctly, she is an inventor. She dreams of being an inventor, and so as she's like trying to imagine ways she could possibly escape Berlin, she's using like her inventor mind to think those things up. So all in all, this is cute. Just, I'm not the target age audience, obviously, but I think if I'd read this when I was younger, I would have enjoyed it more, and I think many kids this age would enjoy it. So I would recommend Over and Out by Jenni Walsh. And then now I'm on to my 4-star reads, and I had 5 4-star reads in the month of April, which is amazing. That makes me so happy to say. April is a great reading month. And so I started my month off actually with the first of my 4-star reads, and that was the novella Half-Blood by J.L. Knight. This is the beginning of the Ilion Chronicles, which a good friend of mine recommended to me, and I finally got around to reading. And this book is just like the prequel, right? But it is a pretty heavy story. Our main character, Jace, but he has gone through many hard things in his life because he is half Ryric, and there are many different races in this world, and the Ryric race is considered to be inhuman, have no soul, and so he's half Ryric, half human. And so all of his life he's faced prejudice for being like inhuman, a half-blood, right? And he has been trained to be a gladiator, and he has been forced to kill. And so just many hard aspects in that regard. He's been physically abused much of his life. And so much of this book is just going through all the terrible things he's been through. And it can be a very heavy read, especially considering how short of a book it is. But it ends on a note of hope that kind of sets the course of how the rest of the series is going to go. And so it does end on a good note. So I just want to give you that. If you yourself are struggling through this book, it does end on a better note. And this whole book is just very well written. You are deeply feeling all the anger that our main character Jace is feeling here. And reading this book makes you more proud of the progress that this character has in the official first book of the series, Resistance by J.L. Knight, which I just read this month in July, but I will not be reviewing that book until my July reads video, but that book is also fantastic and amazing. So this was good. I definitely would recommend, again, for older readers. So yeah, I've heard that if you like the Blades of Akhtar series, you'll also like the Ilion Chronicles series. However, I myself have not read the Blades of Akhtar series, so I myself cannot say anything about that. So that was my first of the 4-star reads. And then my next 4-star read was Castle of the Winds by Christina Baehr, I think is how you pronounce it, from the Secrets of Ormdale series. Now, this series, if you've not heard anything about this series, is a phenomenal series. It is so great. The covers are adorable, and I've been wanting to savor this series, which is why I'm only on the 3rd book in the series. I still have not read any further books in the series as of July, but this is the cutest book. Now, this book in particular was really interesting because certain aspects of this book reminded me of the book A Crown of Snow and Ice by Melanie Cellier, which they're not alike at all, but just for some reason certain aspects kept on making me think of that book. And I think it's because of like the secret village in the mountains type trope that is in both books. Yes, it's just extremely good. And this book, I only rated 4 stars simply because she is not in Wormdale Abbey or Wormwood Abbey, Secrets of Wormwood Abbey. So she's not at Wormwood Abbey for the majority of this book, like pretty much the entirety of this book. She is not in Wormwood Abbey, and so you're not getting to see all these familiar characters that we've come to know and love throughout the other 2 books in this series. And so that was just a little bit of a bummer. However, I still love the series. I love the content. I will say though, for those of you who have read the first couple books in the series, the end of this series seemed to hint towards a potential love triangle in future books, and I'm not very happy about that. I sincerely hope I'm wrong and I'm just reading into it, but it does seem to be hinting towards that. So we'll see what happens, but as of right now, there's no love triangle, and I'm hoping it stays that way. We'll see. And then my next 4-star read was actually one that I read out loud to my sisters, and that was A Dream of Ebony and White by Melanie Cellier. Speaking of Melanie Cellier, and this is her Snow White retelling, and this book has the best character development in the entirety of the second series she wrote, because Melanie Cellier, she wrote in her The Four Kingdoms series, there are 3 series set in the same world, and this is the second series that is set in that world. When I originally first read the books by Melanie Cellier, I accidentally read the second series first. So this is one of the first books I read by her, and I do just really love it. I will say though that our main girl is only 16, and there is a little bit of a romance. And it just is strange being older than 16 and reading about a 16-year-old in a romance book. It seems wrong. Yeah. Seems problematic, even though it's not necessarily problematic. So I will just point that out there. It is a romance book. But it is really cute, and it is a fairy tale retelling, and I love character retellings. Yeah. So my 13-year-old sister also rated this 4 stars. I was so glad she loved it that much. But then my 12-year-old sister, she rated it only 2.5 stars. I do not think the romance thing was really for her, even though I edited out some of the longing stares since they were just too much for her, right? So as I was reading it aloud, I just sometimes omitted some of those things, but I think it was just a little too much for her, which is a-okay, totally fine. She just knows for the future that this is not her thing. And then my next 4-star read was Soot and Slipper by Kate Stradling, and this is the first book I've ever read by Kate Stradling. I read this on my Kindle, and this was so cute. I felt like it really captured the essence of Cinderella, the Cinderella story as a whole, because our main character Eugenie, I think Eugenie is how you pronounce her name, which is such a cute name for a Cinderella character, by the way. But she is like very naive, very innocent, and she always wants to think the best of people, which means that she allows people to take advantage of her sweetness and her naivety. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But she allows people to take advantage of that, and how she always wants to see the best in people. And that is how we see that why she still stays in the situation she's in. But this was really cute, really well written. I do wish it would have been a little longer, because then maybe it would have been a little bit less insta-love. But it was just overall really cute, and I would gladly recommend this book to anyone. So yes, 4 stars, cute, easy read, loved it. And then I finally have an actual book to hold up for you guys. My last 4-star read was Beyond the Fort by LaPres. Look, it's an autographed copy. Let me see if I can find that for you. It's addressed to Lois. I got this book secondhand in a little free library, but still, autographed, really cute. And this was pretty cool because it is set in Fort Michilimackinac, yeah, which is in the Upper Peninsula, I think. I should probably double check my sources. It's next to the Mackinac Bridge, either Upper Peninsula or Lower Peninsula. I definitely need to double check. But this is a time travel book set in Michigan with like a French fur trader post. That's just so cool, right? I think it's so cool. I mean, there are none that I know of, like books set in Michigan that are time travel. And so our main girl, Christine, she accidentally travels back into time. And I do have to say, her reaction to traveling back in time seemed a little bit unrealistic. I think I would be freaking out a lot more, but who knows? She just seemed strangely calm about it. I would not be that calm. So she travels back in time, and I will say many things happen throughout the course of this book. Some emotional things happen, and I do not feel like the book was quite well written enough for you to be feeling the same emotions that the main characters are feeling. But it was still just overall really cute. Would recommend. 4 stars. Oh, one more thing to mention. How did I forget this? Main guy Henry, he's a little bit of a love interest, and he has a strong sense of justice. However, that also exhibits itself in some anger problems, some anger issues that this guy hopefully has some character development with. I'll put that out there. Now I can go on to my 5-star fiction book, which I already mentioned earlier in this video, and that is What Comes of Attending the Commoner's Ball. This book was a reread, and I love this book so much. It is so cute. I love the whimsical writing style. I cannot believe that this was a debut book. I mean, I love how the main character is a little bit obsessed with cheese. It's kind of funny because I used to be obsessed with cheese too before I found out I was lactose intolerant. But this is the one that is like Cinderella meets Howl's Moving Castle. I think it's so fun that I read Howl's Moving Castle and the Cinderella retelling and What Comes of Attending the Commoner's Ball all in the same month. That's so fun. But I love our main girl, Hester. She is superstitious, but overall she does have a pretty good head on her shoulders, which is not something super common in fairy tale retellings, unfortunately. And then there are Hubert and, Engelbert. There's 2 princes in here. And one of the princes, the younger princes, he falls for the main character, and the older prince is like, no, that cannot happen. And so he's trying to stop this from happening. And it's just all one big ordeal. Very dramatic, very over the top, and yeah, I love it. So 5 stars. Gladly recommend to anyone who loves over the top fun romps. Yes, definitely. So, if you watched this all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I read a grand total of 10 books this month, and then I had 11 reviews because I also had that one DNF. But all in all, it was a really good reading month, and I'm very happy with all of the good reviews I get to say. I don't always get a chance to do that. So stay tuned for my next video, which is not actually going to be my May book wrap-up, but it's actually going to be a video of all the books I'm going to be bringing with me to college, because in just a few weeks here, I'm going to be moving to college, which is going to be a big life change, a little bit of a scary life change. But I know that I'm going to be bringing books, even though people always say that you should not bring books to college since you won't ever have any time to read them. But I'm disregarding the probably wise advice, and I will be bringing some anyway. So that video is going to be about all the books I do decide to bring. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.